All right, so I think we are live. Thank you to everybody who has joined us so far. I'm sure there will be more people joining us as we go on. As you know, this is a virtual town hall about student loans. My name is Kyla Pecchia. I am an attorney that practices in Providence, but I am also the executive director of Millennial Rhode Island. And I'm joined here today by fellow panelists, Attorney General Peter Neronha and Treasurer Seth Magaziner. So if I had my little applause button, that would go off now. So just imagine uproarious applause. Millennial Rhode Island, for those of you who might not know, is an organization dedicated to inspiring young professionals in Rhode Island to choosing Rhode Island as a place to live and work, raise a family, start a business. And we do this by connecting people through events like these, usually in person. But due to current circumstances, this is the best we have. So this is what we work with for now. But part of our mission is to advocate for certain issues that affect young professionals in Rhode Island. One of them obviously being student loans, and one of the highest priorities. We advocated with Attorney General Neronha and Treasurer Magaziner last legislative session for the legislation that actually is resulted in this conversation that we're having today. So we'll learn about some of that today. If you're interested, I want to keep this spiel really brief. If you're interested in anything else about Millennial Rhode Island, we have a website, we have an Instagram, we have a Twitter, we have a Facebook. It is all at Millennial R.I. And for those of you who I might have charmed into coming to another event, we do have another virtual event tomorrow where we'll be featuring local millennial artists in a virtual gallery with the Waterfire Arts Center. But without further ado, we wish we could have had this event in person tonight, but we can't. So I'd like to thank everybody for making this possible. And I'd like to recognize other elected officials and members of partner organizations who are also participating and have participated in this project so far. And that would be Senator Sandra Cano, Senator Dawn Ewer, Rep. Terry Courtbrand, Rep. Jason Knight, Councilwoman Nerva LaFortune, Councilman, David Salvatore, and our partners, colleagues at the Department of Business Regulation, the Rhode Island Student Loan Authority, AFL, CIO, and the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. Big, long list. Everybody's on board to help us with student loans. Please help us. And thank you to any other elected officials or member partner organizations that I might have missed. Feel free to sound off in the chat if you want. I can't see it, but feel free. Housekeeping, that brings me to housekeeping. You can enter your questions in the box on the side at any time during the presentation. We will try to get to as many as we possibly can, time permitting, but we do want you to know that if you asked a question and it wasn't necessarily answered virtually during this chat, someone will reach out to you and answer you personally. This is being recorded, so if you or a friend you know wanted to be here, but for some reason they couldn't watch this live, we will be recording this and it will be distributed through various channels after we're done. And for those of you who might not have already found it, we will be going through a slideshow to go along with the talking points. And there is a PDF attached in the handouts portion on the side. So feel free to follow along and follow along with our presentation. So to get started, I think I will hand it over to the treasurer to go over some of the terms that we'll be using during the presentation.
Thank you, Kyla. This is Seth Magaziner. I want to start by thanking you and everyone at Millennial Rhode Island for the work that you do. You know, we are a misunderstood generation, but you know, now I think officially the largest generation in the United States, and you know, have a very unique set of issues that we deal with, including this student loan crisis. So thank you to Millennial Rhode Island and everything that you do to support people across Rhode Island. And thank you also to Attorney General Neronha, who is doing a terrific job for the people of Rhode Island and is a great partner on this effort and on many others. So I'm going to start just at a very basic level with some of the terms that we're going to be dealing with during the course of this town hall. In particular, we're going to be talking a lot about some of the protections and resources that are available to help Rhode Islanders with student loans, but which protections and rights are relevant to you depends on what type of student loan you have. And at a high level, there's a couple of different types of student loans, and it's very important to know which kind of loan you have in order to know which of these resources and protections is relevant to you. Most student loans in the country are federal student loans where the federal government is the lender. These are called direct federal loans, and about 75% of the student loans in the country are direct federal loans where the United States Department of Education is your lender. There's also, prior to 2010, a second type of federal loan called federal guaranteed loans, where a private lender, like a bank, was the lender, but the federal government guaranteed those loans. That program was ended in 2010, but there are still a number of people out there that have these guaranteed loans, which include the Perkins Loan Program and the FFEL, or Federal Family Education Loan Program. So these are loans that are guaranteed by the federal government, but where the government was not the lender. And then totally separate from all of that, there are also private loans where the government, the federal government, has nothing to do with it, and the loan is made entirely by a private lender. It could be a bank, you know, like Citizens Bank or Navigate Credit Union. It could be an online lender. It could be a state agency like the Rhode Island Student Loan Authority, or, you know, some colleges and universities make their own loans to students. So three broad categories. The biggest one and the most common one is a direct federal loan where the federal government is your lender. You could also, prior to 2010, have gotten a guaranteed loan like Perkins or FFEL, or you could have a private loan where a private bank or other private lender is your lender. A couple of other terms that we'll cover during the course of this presentation. IDR is short for income-driven loan repayment or income-based repayment. So many types of loans, including federal direct loans, which are the most common kind, borrowers can be eligible, if they're having a hard time keeping up with their loan payments, can be eligible for IDR, where the payment amount is tied to a percent of your income. So IDR is meant to make it easier for people to pay their loans by tying the loan payment to a percent of income. Again, not all types of loans have IDR, but many different kinds of loans do, including the direct federal loans. Another option for many loans, including direct federal loans, is PSLF, or Public Service Loan Forgiveness. Under PSLF, for federal direct loans, if you work for 10 years in a nonprofit organization or for a government, you can be, after 10 years of payments, eligible to have your remaining loan balance forgiven. And so this is pretty broad. It can include work as a teacher or as a police officer, because those are government employees. It can include working for any nonprofit organization, including religious organizations. The 10 years of payments does not have to be consecutive. It's 120 monthly payments. And so those can be 120 in a row, or they can have gaps in between. And again, PSLF, Public Service Loan Forgiveness, direct federal loans have this option available. Guaranteed loans like FFEL and Perkins do not, although you can potentially get access by consolidating into a direct loan, which we'll talk about later. The final thing on terms that I'll mention is servicers. Servicers are companies that are not necessarily your lender, although they may be. Servicers are the companies that process your loan payments, that actually take the money out of your bank account and use it to pay down your loan. We're going to talk a lot about servicers a little later in the presentation, because the legislation that we all worked on together last year to strengthen the rights of student loans student loan borrowers in Rhode Island had a lot to do with cleaning up the loan servicing practices. So I'll stop there, and we'll move to the next slide. Very briefly, as I mentioned before, in order to know which protections and which resources are relevant to you, it's important to know what type of loan you have. Is it a federal direct loan? Is it a guaranteed loan? Or is it a private loan? If you don't know, you can call your servicer and ask them. If that's difficult, or you have a hard time getting through, or don't know who your servicer is, you can also go to the website studentaid.gov. Studentaid.gov has a questionnaire basically that can help you figure out what type of loan you have.
Okay, so as the treasurer said, part of the reason that this legislation was so important and came to the forefront last year, last legislative session, is because there's over 130,000 student loan borrowers in Rhode Island, with a total of $4.5 billion in outstanding debt. And I think I'm a large portion of that, just with my law school loans. So obviously it is a priority for millennial age professionals, and student loan debt is a crisis here and across the country. The crisis definitely affects millennial professionals in different ways. Probably the most obvious way is we are delayed in buying a home or saving for retirement. We have to make really difficult financial choices just to pay the loan amount every month. But student loan debt is a cross-generational problem. And the greatest growth in student loan balances have been among borrowers over 50 who are returning to school later in life, or borrowers who are co-signing for their children or grandchildren. And like I said, the student loan debt crisis is just one of the many reasons that Millennial Rhode Island has worked with the Treasurer and the Attorney General on the Student Loan Bill of Rights, which we will get to now.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to the Attorney General in a minute to talk about the Student Loan Bill of Rights and the protections that it puts in place for Rhode Islanders. But first, I just want to outline what some of the problems are that we were working to solve. As I mentioned earlier, student loan servicers are the companies that process the payments, that take the money out of your bank account and use it to pay down your loan. Even if you have a federal loan where the federal government is your lender, the federal government contracts with private companies to service the loans. Some of the servicers that you may have heard of are places like Navient, Nelnet, Pennsylvania Higher Education. There's a whole list of them, but those are some of the more common ones. And unfortunately, the student loan servicing space is one where oftentimes, either through neglect or perhaps on purpose, servicers give borrowers a hard time in unfair ways very frequently. So one thing that happens very often, for example, is someone's having a hard time paying down their student loan, they're having a hard time keeping up with their payments, they call their servicer, they say, hey, what can I do? What are my options? And the servicer doesn't tell them about all the options, doesn't tell them, hey, you might be eligible for IDR, or you might be eligible for PSLF, or for a refinancing. A lot of servicers have been found to be putting people into forbearance. Under forbearance, you pay nothing for a period of time, but the interest continues to build, so that when you have to start making your payments again, you owe even more, and it's even harder to keep up. Now, why do servicers do this sometimes? Why do they push people into forbearance instead of income-based repayment or other options? Well, without speculating too much, just keep in mind, once you pay off your loan, the servicer stops getting paid. And so they do have an incentive to make it take longer for you to pay off your loan. That's not to say that every servicer is doing the wrong thing all the time. It's not to say that every lender is being abused, but there is a pattern here where, study after study has shown that a lot of servicers push people toward forbearance instead of income-based repayment and other options. And it just so happens that those options that they're pushing people into are not necessarily better for the borrower, but are better for the servicer. Another example, there are a lot of reports of servicers charging people the wrong amounts, drawing the wrong amounts out of their bank accounts, giving wrong information about people to the credit rating agencies. And again, there's some real misalignments of incentives there. Final example I'll give is public service loan forgiveness. You know, that program where after 10 years, if you work in public service and you make your payments, your loans at the end of the 10 years will be forgiven. That program was put into law and the federal government back in 2007. After 10 years, the first cohort of people finished their 10 years and they said, okay, we're ready for our loan forgiveness now. We've been making our payments for 10 years and we're ready for our loan forgiveness under public service loan forgiveness. And in that first year, the rejection rate was 99.5%. And people had spent, you know, a whole 10 years of their lives planning for this, counting on it, and 99.5% were denied. Why? Often because the servicer messed something up, mistimed a payment, drew the wrong amount, so that people thought that they had 120 payments, but not all 120 counted. And then the servicer said, well, we'll investigate it, but it'll take us a couple years and you should keep making your payments in the meantime. So these are some of the examples of things that are all too common. I think a lot of times when people have these experiences, they think it's their fault and they did something wrong. That's not always the case. And these are some examples of the kinds of problems and the kinds of abuses that we worked together to clean up in Rhode Island. So with that, I'll turn it over to Attorney General Neronha, who can talk about the Rhode Island Student Loan Bill of Rights and some of the protections that we worked together to prevent these sorts of things from happening to Rhode Islanders.
Yeah, thanks, Treasurer, and thanks, Kyla, for moderating this town hall. It's really great. I am not a millennial. I think technically I am on the very end of the boomer generation. So nobody say, hey, boomer on this thing. I'm really going to be offended. My kids did that to me. And I was born in '63, which is at the very end of the boomer generation. You know, I had lots of student loans when I was in college and law school. And, you know, my memory is it was a lot simpler. I mean, I had plenty of them, but getting them paid off was a very simple process. I knew what I had to pay. I knew what the interest rate was. I made a career choice that I didn't really want to make to go to a large law firm. But that's the kind of thing I know that you're all dealing with. Because you're making career choices and life choices, you're either delaying them or, you know, I always wanted to do public service and I've been able to do that ever since, but I couldn't do it for the first 7 years of my career. And so I know that these are the challenges that you face. And it's even worse when you can't get accurate information from your servicer. And so the Treasurer's really been leading the charge on this since well before I took office. And somebody described him, I think it was Chairman McNamara, as the quarterback of this effort. That's definitely true. Chairman McNamara and Senator Order were just great, along with her colleagues and Kyla and her group at Millennial R.I, and to really get this legislation through. And what it really does is it gives Rhode Islanders who have student loans, you know, some basic rights. It sets standards for student loan servicing. So look, student loan, the bottom line is they need to be upfront and they need to provide answers, and those answers have to be, you know, accurate. There's a system in place for DBR to require these servicers to register. There are actually 41. I got the list yesterday. There's actually 41 registered in Rhode Island from all over the country. One's actually in the UK. So there's a lot of them, but at least we know who they are. They've got to pay a registration fee. So, you know, we know who's doing business here, and that's really important. So we know the universe that we're dealing with. You know, they all have to do, as I said, basically the same thing, which is be upfront and be fair and answer questions and get back to you. And they can't deceive you. They can't deceive borrowers. They can't give borrowers misleading information. The Bill of Rights does a couple of other things I think are really important. One is it allows my office to bring a lawsuit on behalf of Rhode Islanders generally. There's a private right of action, but allows our office to take action. We could not do that without this bill. And so that's a really significant consumer protection provision, which is in this bill, which frankly we ought to have more broadly in Rhode Island. We don't in our general consumer protection statute, but we have it in this particular one, and that's a huge benefit. And it also provides, frankly, a place for borrowers to call if they have questions. And that's my office, the Consumer Protection Division, which can be reached at 4400. I have 7 investigators down there that do all kinds of consumer work, but we've trained them also in this particular area, and that training is going to be ongoing. And the point of that is to give Rhode Islanders a place to call, to speak to somebody who's going to look at the case objectively, with their interest in mind, will answer the phone and help walk through some of these complicated issues. So that's what the Bill of Rights provides. I talked a little bit about this already, but these are some of the responsibilities that under the Bill of Rights these loan servicers have to do. They've got to give you information. They've got to give you information about the loan terms, the progress that you're making towards repayment, kind of where you are in the life of the loan, and your eligibility for loan forgiveness programs. And they've got to apply your loan payments in a way that most benefits you. They can't, if you got more than one loan, they can't apply payments in a way that benefits them, which would extend the payments or extend the interest you're going to pay if one's higher interest than another. They got to do it the way you want to do it in the way that benefits you. As I said, they've got to respond to you and provide quick customer service. They've got to give accurate information to credit bureaus. We have seen complaints about, where the borrower and the servicer are not in agreement as to where they should be in a loan, and yet the servicer is still providing negative information to a credit agency. They can't do that. They shouldn't do that. They need to be accurate. And if they're not right and they're providing information that is negative to you, well, that's a problem. And I mentioned already the requirement that they register with DBR. As I also mentioned, they can't defraud or mislead you. They can't engage in unfair or deceptive practices. They've got to provide accurate information to credit bureaus. And look, they've got to communicate with you, and you can authorize us to communicate with the servicer as well. And we would really encourage that. And they really can't refuse to evaluate you for a forgiveness or other kind of program that might benefit you.
Okay, so I guess we're going to transition a little bit into federal protections and the CARES Act. So generally on the federal level, the enforcement of the list that Attorney General Neronha just read off against student loan servicers has been weaker than I think most of us borrowers would like. However, Congress did take some steps to give relief to borrowers during this COVID-19 crisis. As many of you may know, the CARES Act was passed by Congress in late March and included programs to help small businesses, expand unemployment insurance, and provide those $1,200 stimulus payments to Americans. And it also included specific provisions to help student loan borrowers, which we'll talk about now.
Yeah, and look, this is really important. There are some great benefits in the CARES Act for student loan borrowers, but one thing that we all need to know and be aware of before we get into this is we got to know what kind of loan we have. And the treasurer alluded to this up front. He was absolutely right to put the spotlight on this because you have different benefits depending on what kind of loans you have. You have a lot more benefits, frankly, if you have one of those federal direct loans. If you have a private loan, you don't get as many, if any, benefits. And then some of the loans that are privately held but guaranteed by the federal government kind of fall in the middle somewhere. So knowing what kind of loan you have is really critically important. That website that the treasurer referred to is a great place to go. Our office will also try to sort that out. The other thing to do is to talk to your servicer and try to have them help you there. I think most servicers are going to give you accurate information, but it's always a good idea, to trust but verify in this particular space. But for loans that are direct federal loans and these FFEL loans that are owned by the federal government or guaranteed by the federal government or held by the federal government as opposed to FFELs that are held by private lenders, and there is a distinction there. But for those set of loans that are on this slide, there's some great measures in the CARES Act. So for 6 months, from March 13th, retroactive to March 13th, all the way until September 30th. So basically from March to October, anyone who's got one of these kinds of loans is automatically in a 6-month forbearance. You don't have to sign up for it. You don't have to opt in. You're already in it. If those payments have already come out of your bank accounts, you're entitled to a refund. And you may want to call to make sure that that's happened, but you don't have to do anything in this particular instance. In this 6-month period, there'll be no additional interest. So no interest accrues while you've got this 6 months to kind of hopefully the economy will come back and we'll all be absolutely where we were, or even better than where we started in March, but no interest over this period of time. All collection activities have to cease. So to the extent debt collectors have been coming, they have to stop. That's true at the moment from my office's point of view for any kind of debt collection, but this is right in the CARES Act for student borrowers. It was not in for other kinds of debts. So it's very, very clear here. No negative credit information can be provided to credit reporting agencies because you haven't made payments during this period. You don't have to make them. So of course, they can't provide negative information to them. And I think this last bullet point on this slide is frankly one of the most critical and frankly amazing, which is that if you are in a public service loan forgiveness program or other debt forgiveness or rehabilitation program, you're in forbearance, but you don't have to make those payments ever. So if you think about that for a minute, if you're not in one of those programs, your payments will be tacked onto the end. So you'll have to make 6 additional payments if they're monthly at the end of your normal loan term. But if you're in one of these forgiveness programs, this forbearance period counts as if you're making the payments. And so that's a really big deal, and it's really important to keep track of that. And it's important to keep track of it because we know that when you get to the end of one of these public forgiveness programs, many times the dispute with the servicer is, I think I'm there as a borrower, and the servicer says you're not. So this is, it's really important to know this. It's really important to keep track of it. So that's this slide.
All right.
Here we go.
I think it's my turn. Thank you, Peter. So as the Attorney General mentioned, some very good protections and resources in the CARES Act for borrowers, especially borrowers with federal direct loans. Here are just like a couple of tips for how to take advantage of those resources and to figure out whether they're right for you or not. First, I'll say at a high level, being able to not have to pay your student loan payments for 6 months and not have any interest billed is a great thing. But if you're not in public service loan forgiveness and you are able to keep paying your loans, you might consider continuing to do so rather than extend the life of your loan an extra 6 months. But if you are in a place where you do want to take advantage of the 6 month suspension and not having to make your payments for 6 months, as the General mentioned, servicers are supposed to put that into effect automatically, but there are some people I know that have set up automatic payments at their bank. And if that's the case, you're going to have to remember to tell your bank to turn off that auto payment, because if it's an arrangement where you have your servicer drawing money from the bank, the servicer should know to stop that automatically for 6 months. But if it's an arrangement where the bank is cutting a check to your servicer every month or making a payment, then the bank may not know. So that's something that's important to check on. Similarly, there are some people who, unfortunately, prior to all of this, were having a hard time making their payments and were having their wages garnished as a result. As the General mentioned, that can be suspended for 6 months out of the CARES Act. But in that case, you're probably going to need to notify your employer, your HR department at your employer, to let them know that they should stop that garnishment through September. If you were in forbearance before the passage of the CARES Act, so before March, where, as a reminder again, a forbearance is an arrangement with your servicer where you make no payments for a period of time, but the interest continues to build. If you were in one of those arrangements before, you should talk with your servicer and make sure that you are taken out of forbearance during the 6 month period so that your interest does not continue to accrue. And then finally, for all of these options, if you take advantage of the 6 month freeze, remember at the end of October to start your payments again so that you're not penalized. Again, this is something that the servicers should do automatically, but as we talked about earlier, sometimes these pesky servicers don't always do what they're supposed to do. And also, if it's an arrangement you had with your bank, the bank would need to know. So again, just be mindful of that September 30th deadline and the fact that you're going to need to be proactive about making sure that your payments start again in October. so that you can keep up. And then the final thing I'll say, just as a tip or as something to look at, if September 30 comes along and you are still experiencing a hardship because of the recession, you haven't been hired back to your job, or you're having some other form of financial stress, again, keep in mind you should look at some of these other options that may be available to you after September 30th, like IDR, like income-driven repayment plans, which again, all direct federal borrowers are entitled to, and some private borrowers as well. So if you're still experiencing stress after this 6-month period is up, contact your servicer and ask them specifically if you're eligible for IDR.
Okay, I think it's back to me. Thanks, Treasurer. So, as we talked about, if you've got one of these federal loans, the CARES Act provides more protections. There are a couple of things that are helpful for Perkins loans that are held by the federal government. And Perkins loans are a little bit like these FFEL loans, which they can fall into 2 categories. Some are held by the federal government, and some are held by private lenders. And so again, it's really important to know which is which. But for the ones that are held by the federal government, that six-month suspension of payments and the waiver of interest during the 6-month period also applies. The other thing to keep in mind here too, with loans that are not owned by the federal government and aren't under the CARE Act, those are loans, as we talked about, are private loans, these commercially held FFEL loans, or your school-owned Perkin loans. So they're different, and really there you really have to rely, to the extent they're willing to do it, on the relief that these lenders or services will voluntarily offer. And some are doing it. Not all of them are doing things the wrong way. So some of them are actually working with borrowers to get some relief. Things like putting folks on alternative payment plans, on temporary deference, or waiving late fees. So you should check with your servicer or a lender about that. But again, as we talked about from the beginning, you have to be really careful there that you're not getting pushed to a place where it may turn out to be, in the end, worse than the situation you're currently in. You want to talk to your servicer about what options are available to you. But I think you should always, as I talked about earlier, trust and verify. One of the ways to do that is by calling my office. But there are other ways that I think the treasurer's or Kyle are going to get into as well.
I want to give just a quick shout out. As the general mentioned, there can be relief options available to private loan borrowers as well. One of the private loan lenders and services that a number of Rhode Islanders have as their lender or servicer is the Rhode Island Student Loan Authority, RISLA. And I know we have some RISLA leaders on the call tonight. RISLA is offering a 3-month suspension of payments on their loans. And I just want to thank them for the efforts at RISLA, the things that they're doing to help Rhode Islanders get through this time, and thank them for that. So that's one example of a relief option that's available to borrowers who have a private loan, in this case from RISLA. There's a lot of information to process here, a lot of complexity. What kind of loan do I have? What kind of protections come with that loan? What are my options if I'm having a hard time keeping up with my payments? And one resource that can help you work through those options is called Summer. Summer is a digital platform, a website or mobile site that can help you figure out, based on what type of loan you have, what your options are to make your payments more easily, to qualify for payment, to qualify for programs that can help you, loan assistance programs and forgiveness programs. Last week it was announced that during the course of the COVID-19 crisis, Summer is making its platform available to Rhode Island borrowers for free. Rhode Island borrowers who have been impacted by COVID-19 can access Summer for free by going to the website meetsummer.org. And again, that can help you figure out which resources are available to help you depending on the type of loan you have. Another resource that is coming online, I believe today, is another collaboration between the Attorney General's office and our office in the State Treasury, which is a website specific to student loan borrowers in Rhode Island, studentloanrightsri.com. This is the new Rhode Island Student Loan Protection Center website. On this website, you can see information about what your rights are as a borrower. So again, if you're having a hard time dealing with your servicer or dealing with your lender, you can go on the website to see what your rights are. We have answers to a number of frequently asked questions that our offices receive, and there'll also be ways for you to connect directly with our offices for assistance. And I believe the Attorney General is going to go into more detail on that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thanks, Treasurer. You know, the site is a great way to connect with our office and the Treasurer's office. And then there are other things that you can do. One is to simply call us at 401-274-4400. We answer the phone. You know, that's really been a priority for that group in this administration, is to be accessible and make sure that we're there to answer the phone. And if we don't answer, you'll get a call back within minutes, not days. I'm really committed to doing that. The other thing is to email us at studentloans@riag.ri.gov. You know, the other thing I want to refer, you know, the members that, you know, the people who are here for this town hall meeting is we put out guidance yesterday that's available on the website. I think we'll be pushing it out as well after this town hall, which really kind of goes through some frequently asked questions, kind of goes over the guidance in long form, and really kind of talks about, you know, the various rights that you have. You know, it's worth taking a look at that. I looked at it again to get ready to do this today. I wanted to make sure I had the concepts fresh in my mind. I think that's a good resource tool. But I really want to assure you that our people down in our Consumer Protection Unit, they are there to help you on these issues, to help you figure out what questions to ask your servicer if you're not sure what to ask. If you call and you're confused by the answers you get, call our folks and they'll help you sort out what follow-up questions to ask. Really want to help you understand what your rights are and vindicate those rights, and make sure that you're getting the kind of treatment that you're entitled to under the law here in Rhode Island. And the other thing too is we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you because, you know, if we think about taking action against a loan servicer that's not doing things the right way, the way we would do that is because we have information from you that tells us what the problem is. And so sharing that information with us is critically important, and I would really encourage you to do it. You know, we want to do this work, and we're anxious for you to reach out to us.
Thanks. So I guess we have about 20 minutes left in what our planned session was. So we might do some, or we are going to do some question and answers. As a reminder to everybody that's still with us on the video chat, you can enter your questions in the questions box. And I do have a couple questions in the queue, but before I do that, I realized that I left some people off the list of thank yous because I was reading too quickly. And those people are Senator Bridget Valverde and Rep. Justine Caldwell. So thank you, and sorry that I left you off. But let's get to our first question, if you don't mind. Our first question we have is, how can someone refinance their loan if a lower interest rate is available? And I believe that was directed towards the treasurer.
Yeah, so depending again on the type of loan you have, there may be refinancing options available either with your existing lender or with a different lender. So for example, you know, I think it's common for people with federal loans to refinance with a private lender that offers them a lower rate. The best thing to do is to shop around and to ask different lenders what rates they will offer you. But one word of caution is be careful, because if you refinance to a different lender, your options for relief programs might be different. So for example, if you have a federal direct loan where you're entitled to income-driven repayment or public service loan forgiveness, and you refinance with a private lender, the private lender may offer you a lower rate, but they won't necessarily offer the income-based repayment option or the PSLF. So refinancing is definitely an option. A lot of people do it. It can help you get a lower rate, but just make sure you're being careful about understanding what options you might be giving up if you refinance with a different lender.
Okay, thank you. I have one for the Attorney General, if you don't mind. We're going to ping pong back and forth. The question is, my student loans are in collection and I am struggling financially. If I get federal stimulus money, will it be grabbed by a debt collector?
Yeah, the answer to that is no. So, we issued guidance about debt collections generally a couple of weeks ago. All these guidances that we've been pushing out live on our website at riag.ri.gov. But the bottom line is that the stimulus money that was sent out by Congress, we concluded here in Rhode Island that under Rhode Island law, it cannot be reached by debt collectors in any way, shape, or form. What's particularly good about the CARES Act is it makes it very clear that when it comes to these protection programs, it certainly can't happen in the context of that setting. But we interpret the CARES Act, the intent behind the CARES Act, that any kind of debt collection directed at stimulus money, that $1,200 payment, and it was a little bit different depending on circumstances, could not be reached by a debt collector. So that money is safe, and if someone tries to reach it, then the person should definitely reach out to our office at our Consumer Protection Unit.
Great. So you get to keep it then. Bottom line.
Bottom line. Yes.
Great. Sounds good. Okay, another one. This one's for the treasurer this time. If I decide to go back to school and they put my federal loan payments on hold, will I still be charged interest while my payments are deferred?
Yeah, so that sounds like a deferment or forbearance, which is typical and is something that a lot of people do, but under most of those forbearances, interest does continue to build. That doesn't mean that it's always a bad thing. Again, if you're, say, for example, you have student loans from your undergrad and you're going back to graduate school for a couple of years and you expect that when you graduate, your income might be higher. Something like a forbearance might be an appropriate option for you. But yes, in many of those plans, the interest does continue to build. And where I think it can really become problematic is, if somebody is taking out one of these forbearances, not because they're going back to school or not because they're just leaving the workforce temporarily, but because they're having a hard time making their payments and they don't know what else to do, then that's where it becomes dangerous because that interest continues to build and the payments will be more expensive when they kick in. But again, if in some situations, if you're going back to school temporarily, it can still be a good option. But yes, you should be mindful of the fact that the interest is likely to continue to build. And you should talk with your servicer to make sure that you understand exactly what the cost is going to be when those payments resume.
That makes sense. Let's see what we have. Oh, we have all kinds of questions here. So exciting. I think the next one we might have touched upon a little bit in the presentation. This one is for the Attorney General. The question is, I have private loans. Will my servicer automatically opt me into the COVID-19 relief that is being offered?
Yeah, well, if they're private loans, they may not even be eligible for the COVID-19 relief, and that's really one of the concerns. If you've got a federal loan, you're automatically opted in. Now, if your private servicer or lender may be willing to give you something similar, and there are some protections that are there for those Perkins loans, but again, only potentially if they're federally held. So the key first is to understand what kind of loans you have. If you've got a private loan, odds are it may not apply. The bottom line, though, is even if it did, you've got to opt in. Unlike the federal loans where you're automatically in, you've got to opt in for the ones that are privately held if you're eligible at all. So there, the key is to call the lender or call the servicer, understand what your loan is, understand what your options are. And if you get a feel, how do I put this? If you get a feel from the answers you're getting that either the answers are not confident, frankly, or you think they're kind of hiding the ball from you, what I would recommend is call our office and kind of walk through what you were told when you called your servicer. And that's a good way to get a reality check on whether or not the answers you're getting ring true. And if they don't, then we can help you try to get better answers.
That's great. I know from personal experience that if I've called my servicer before and I have Nelnet, that you never get the same person. So even if you have a follow-up question, you have to re-explain your whole conversation. So it's good to know that your office will be a resource even for something like that too. So thank you. Another question for the treasurer, are RISLA loans generally considered to be private loans?
Yes, RISLA loans are private loans, even though technically RISLA is a public agency. But again, that's a good example. RISLA is a good example, once again, of how there are some private lenders and private servicers that are making relief options available, even though it's not under the CARES Act.
Okay. Let's see, what else do we have? Okay. For the Attorney General, can you help with getting service providers to give an accurate assessment of the number of qualifying payments for the PSLF program? I have asked repeatedly and have been told that my situation is under review. So does your office provide assistance in that way?
We do.
Too?
Yeah, of the calls that we've been getting, many of them have involved that very thing. And so what I would recommend is, look, call us at whatever point you are, but in terms of your process, but to the extent you have your documents together and, millennials can scan everything in, right? We're confident. I scanned in a letter today and emailed it. So if I can do it, any millennial can. So, get those documents scanned in. If you call our office, we'll tell you how to, what the email is I've given it to you. But if you call down there, email the documents in, then we can start to try to figure out what the loans look like on the documents. And then, we can be your advocate or help you get the answers you're looking for. But those are common issues that have come into the office. It's why I think the treasurer alluded to it up front, and I did as well. I think that's one of the most common problems we're seeing. And our office has already taken, a fair number of those calls already. Some of them are in midstream, some we've been able to resolve. So yeah, definitely call us with that question.
And would you recommend, so like every time I make a payment, I print out that I've made the payment? Is that kind of the diligent record keeping that you'd be recommending, something like that, and printing out conversations and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, in our guidance, we really make a big point of that, is document everything, print everything out. If you don't print it, save a copy to your hard drive, whatever it is. I mean, the days of having a coupon book, like when I was doing a coupon book, I sent it in. At the end, when I paid whatever it was, 60 payments, 120 payments, I was done. It was 10 years, 120 payments. It's much more complicated now. Things are changing, services are changing, lender, whoever holds your loans could change. Yeah, print everything out. Have the original loan document. If you don't have it, figure out a way to get it. Ask the servicer for it. Have a file on all of your loans or each of your loans, and that'll really help you later on, particularly when you've got to document it. That's why I mentioned it with respect to the forbearance. Those 6 payments that you won't have to make are going to count as payments, right? So just make sure you count those when you get to the end, because even though you didn't make the payments, they count, and you don't have to be Nostradamus to see that at the end those 6 payments may well become a source of dispute between a servicer who's going to say, look, they made less, 6 less than you were supposed to, and the borrower remembering correctly that during this COVID-19 crisis they got credit for 6 payments they didn't have to make in a loan forgiveness program.
Oh, great. And that was actually another question that I had teed up. So the question, just to reiterate, was, so we can pay nothing for 6 months during this crisis, but still have those 6 payments reflected towards the qualifying 120. So is that basically, that's correct? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's I had to ask whether or not that was true when I saw that the first time, because that's a great benefit. Yeah.
That is a great benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the problem too, is that we have to ask if a lot of things are true that are happening.
Yeah, and I think the Attorney General's point is a good one. Like, keep the records, because the law clearly says that those 6 payments count, but when you get to the end, you never know. I mean, my wife had student loans from her grad school that we were able to just pay down. We were lucky we were in a position where we could pay them off early a couple months ago. And when we went on the website to do it and to put in, more than the normal monthly payment, there was all this fine print at the bottom, and at the very bottom of the fine print, it said that they were going to take that money and just use it to like make each monthly payment for like the next 7 years and continue to charge the interest on it unless we opted out of that. So there's all kinds of tricks that they play. So I think the Attorney General is absolutely right. Document everything.
It's what we tell clients and what I tell friends, and it's document everything. So that's a good point. We have a question for the treasurer. Is it possible to make payments to Perkins loans while maintaining suspension of interest that is accruing?
So I have to double check this, but I believe that for all federal loans that apply for the 6-month suspension of payments, if you make your payments, you can opt to pay just the principal and not the interest. But I'd have to double check whether that's specifically true for Perkins loans, but I would assume so.
Okay. I have another question just touching upon the 6-month period that we've been talking about. This individual is a teacher and has enrolled in the public service loan forgiveness program. It was mentioned earlier that payments have been suspended. Does that mean in terms of long-term like loans, or will this person have 6 more months of payments to make up at the end? So will their original date be 6 months later now?
No, I mean, that unless I'm sort of conflating two things here, and I don't think that I am. It's as if you're paying, so it's going to end on the same date. It's going to end on the same date, and you just won't have to make up those payments at the end. For everybody who's not in one of those programs, it will be extended by 6 months because you've still got to make those 120 payments if it's a 10-year program. But in this case, you won't. It's the months that you're not paying because of this program, it's as if somebody else is paying them on your behalf. So it will end at the same time. You just will not have to make those 6 payments. And if you've made them, if they've already been deducted somehow, then you're entitled to a refund, and you should call your servicer and ask for that refund, because that may have happened. They may have just come out automatically.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. In the same genre of this public service loan forgiveness. So a question for the treasurer: does the public service loan forgiveness have to be in a low-income town, city, or municipality? Excuse me. This person is a public school teacher in a suburb.
No, anyone who works in government or for any nonprofit. It doesn't matter whether it's urban, suburban. It doesn't matter whether you're a teacher or a police officer. Whatever. As long as your employer is a government or a nonprofit, you are eligible for PSLF. Again, if you have a direct federal loan.
Okay. So we have about 5 minutes, and we have a couple of questions left. I think this one is a important one that bears repeating. Could you please state again when the COVID-19 forbearance period began? I believe that I heard March 13th. If I made a payment on that date and my payment was not due until a later date in March, would I be entitled to a refund of that payment?
Yeah, that is the right date, and I can't see why you wouldn't be. That makes perfect sense that you would be. So the answer to that is yes.
Yay! Applause button. Yay! I wish this program had one of those. That'd be great. Okay, and then the last question. I just want to make sure that I'm reading it properly. So I think it might just be another in the same conversation we're having about the 6-month period. You can still qualify for public service forgiveness even if you cannot pay for these 6 months. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. That's great. Unless there are any more questions, I don't have any more teed up. Do you have any final words of wisdom for us trying to pay our student loans off?
No, I just repeat, something that we said before. If you do run into issues with your servicer, whether it's about PSLF or whether it's about them saying that you paid a certain amount when you paid something different, or them drawing the wrong amount from your bank account, if you do run into those issues, I hear it from so many people that they think they did something wrong, and rather than just assume that you did something wrong, go to that student loan protection website, call the Attorney General's office, call my office, because it's very common that these servicers don't do the right thing, and we can help you figure out whether you did actually make a mistake or whether something else happened and you're entitled to some relief. So, that's the final thing I'd say, besides just thanking once again everyone for joining, and thanking the Attorney General for being a great partner and leader on this, and thank you, Kyla, for being a great moderator and a great leader at Millennial Rhode Island. You do a terrific job.
Thanks. Thank you. Anything from you, Mr. Attorney General?
Yeah, look, I just would echo what the treasurer was saying. We get about 600 calls in our consumer protection unit a month, and the folks down there do an outstanding job, on behalf of Rhode Islanders. But what we see over and over and over again is that if consumers don't push for their rights, if they don't demand answers, if they don't enlist our help in doing that, they're not just going to get it automatically. You know, whether it's a gym membership, you know, during COVID-19 and the gym is closed, whether it's an airline refund, you know, you're not some will do the right thing and some won't. But if you don't push a little bit, and we're there to help you push, we're there to push for you. Don't assume that you're going to get what you're entitled to, and you're entitled to, you know, the right thing, to being treated fairly, and to get answers. And so, you know, that's where I leave it. I think, you know, use the website, reach out to the treasurer's office, reach out to my office. You know, we're really working together to try to do as much as we can to advance the ball here. And I just want to, again, thank the treasurer for his leadership and yours, Kyla. It's good to see you, and great job moderating this town hall. These are not easy things to do. I'm grateful for your leadership here.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you both for being here. I speak, I think, for many people my age when I say that we very much appreciate how accessible that you both are, and how you're a champion of these issues that we really care about. And I think when you're going through the motions of incurring all this debt and, you know, like you said, trying to make life choices, it's really difficult. So it's really nice to know that we have some great leadership in our corner, and we're really appreciative of that. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here and learning this technology and answering all our nitpicky questions. I would just say one final reminder for people who are still with us: please make sure that you download the PowerPoint from the handout section on the sidebar over here. A lot of great information, a lot of great resources for you. Contact information that will be very valuable somewhere down the line. And please make sure you check out the website if you have any questions. I believe that the recording of this for any of your friends who missed it will go up on various channels at some point. But I think until we convene again, I hope that everybody stays safe and stays well. And thank you again for setting this up with us and being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
See you, Seth.
Yeah, talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you.